Hello and welcome to my playthrough of the Owlcat game Pathfinder Kingmaker. Now, you might be wondering, does the world really need another playthrough of Pathfinder Kingmaker? There are lots that you can find on YouTube, and the answer to that is probably no, in a sort of self-depreciating way, but I do kind of feel that there is a gap in the market, and this being one of my favourite games ever released, I'm hoping to fill that gap in the market. So the reason why I think there's a gap in the market is that most playthroughs sort of are either blind playthroughs or they're just sort of someone playing through the game. And what it really lacks, what we really lack is what I'd call a completionist playthrough, and that's an idea I shamelessly cribbed from a very good player of Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 called Miv-san, or Miv for short, whose videos I have really enjoyed over a few months. He is an excellent player of that game. He's incredibly knowledgeable about that game, and what I consider that we lack is an equivalent for Pathfinder Kingmaker, of somebody basically showing the game off, almost like as a tribute to the game and to the developers, to really show it off in its best possible light, as a sort of skilled playthrough and a knowledgeable playthrough. Now, I really struggled for what to actually call this, because I think calling it a skilled playthrough is a bit conceited. It's a bit up myself, and calling it a completionist playthrough felt like it was just copying from that particular YouTuber, Miv. And yet, I haven't been able to come up with a better name than a completionist playthrough. But I put a little caveat there that it's a semi-completionist playthrough, because of course it's I'll get on to talking about the sort of concept, but trying to do an actual completionist playthrough I feel would be impossible, because there's branching stuff and there's random events, and I just don't think it's possible. So the other reason for doing this, beyond what I felt was a lack of completionist playthroughs on the market for this game, was that Owlcat's new game, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, just released a couple of months ago, in beginning of September, I believe, and it makes a lot of improvements on this game, but it's not quite there yet, in my opinion. So I've revisited Kingmaker, and it's reminded me what a great game this turned out to be, and how much I love this game. I really do think that people refer to this as a spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. I don't think I'd quite sort of say that, because I don't really know what it means, like a spiritual successor. Like, it's a game in the same vein. It's a CRPG, classic RPG, or computer RPG, classic RPG through and through, and it just sort of captures that initial vibe. So when I first played this game, I thought it was impossible, could not get my head around it, and that actually reminded me of when I first played Baldur's Gate 1. I just couldn't understand what I was doing. Everything seemed impossible. I was dying to a wolf on the first screen after the tutorial, which, if anyone played through Kingmaker at release, I have it on good authority that people tended to die to wolves as soon as they were out of the tutorial area. So with the release of Wrath of the Righteous, I feel that now's the perfect time, and I guess apologies to Miv for shamelessly cribbing his concept and almost certainly executing it in a much less good manner. So I'm going to try and keep this first video of a modest length, but I'm going to take some time to discuss a few things about this game. This is there's going to be no gameplay in this first video. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss what my playthrough concept is here, and then I'm going to spend some time discussing the game difficulty and how I'm going to play and what difficulty I'm going to play on and why. Then I'm just going to talk very briefly about the differences between the Enhanced Plus edition. You can see I'm moving the mouse, bottom left 2.1.7b, the Enhanced Plus edition and the original edition as this was first released. Then I'm going to talk on a controversial subject, real-time with pause versus turn-based, although I don't like the term versus because it sort of implies that they're at war. Although if you read any discussions of people discussing the pros and cons or why they love one over the other, you kind of feel that people get very worked up about it. Next I'm going to talk about my mods, which I've got installed, to which the answer is basically none, but I feel I should cover that. And then after that, that's sort of discuss the game as a whole. Then I'm going to go into character creation, and I'm going to talk through creating a character and what the various different parts of the character creator do and what they impact, and I'm going to do that as I'm talking through creating my main character for the game, which I think is a lot easier to do than to do in a vacuum, because I guess comparing it to Baldur's Gate 2, there's more to this system than there is to the Baldur's Gate system as far as character creation goes. So, first of all, my playthrough concept, and as I will constantly allude to in this is cribbed. This is the idea of a completionist playthrough, or to use the I guess a conceited term, a knowledgeable playthrough. So rather than playing through just sort of either blind or in a fresh run, I've taken it upon myself to do this knowledgeable playthrough, which is that I know the game pretty well, in its ins and outs, and what I'd really like to do is show off that knowledge and to show off the game. So it's a showcase rather than a 100% playthrough. I won't be demonstrating how to get all the achievements in the game, and I won't be doing every single thing because that's impossible in the game, because there's branching choices. You can do either or. So what I'd say is that I'm doing it in the spirit of doing as much as possible in the game and doing that well, and really discussing as I'm doing things why I'm doing that, and that comes into the combat quite a lot, and discussing the level up. So when I'm leveling up, I've got a plan which is in my head, and I've kind of got it written down, and that plan has justification. I'm not simply following a build that somebody else has written, nor am I just sort of winging it and leveling up what I feel is good. I've got a particular sort of vision for how my character is going to turn out and how the NPCs are going to turn out, and I'm going to be sticking to that 95% of the time. So yeah, obviously we can't do 100% because of the way the game is structured. There's even early on in chapter 1, there's branching choices that change the way chapter 1 plays out depending on where you go first. But what I will do is I'll do all quests as in the journal that are not mutually exclusive. That includes all errands, and that includes doing all companion quests. So I'll be doing everything that the companions require. I'm not going to be using all companions, although I will be using a wider variety of companions than just sticking to a particular roster for the whole game. Although, by mid-game, unless it's specific quests that require companions, I will basically be sticking to the same companions, because there are certain ones that I prefer over others, and that may or may not overlap with the ones I consider are more powerful. It certainly overlaps with the ones that I feel synergize well with my gameplay style. Now, as well as doing all quests and companion quests, I'm also going to do all curse research, because we're working towards what I guess is considered the secret ending, although it is not particularly secret at all. And I'll be gaining all artisans. I won't be necessarily gaining all artifacts, artisans, sort of masterpieces, because there's a lot of RNG involved in that. However, I will be completing all storyteller artifacts, those are the collectibles through the game, which you can get to trade into the storyteller. I'll be collecting all of them and cashing them in for some nice artifacts, and I will be clearing all areas. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean revealing every single part of the map on every single tiny area, but it does mean visiting every area and doing whatever the centerpiece to that area is. So I say I'll be covering 99% of all map space, because there's a lot of collectibles and stuff hidden away in different areas of each maps. Now, that doesn't mean I'll be doing everything as soon as it presents itself. The way the game is structured, there are plenty of encounters where it is much wiser to come back to them later, i.e. gain a couple of levels and then attempt them. And that includes some of the large maps. There are certain areas which are of a much higher level than you will be, where it would be very much in your favour to, instead of reloading a lot and waiting for magic 20s, you just gain a couple of levels, gain some new gear, and come back later to stomp that particular encounter. And that's kind of in the spirit of Baldur's Gate, actually. You could very easily in Baldur's Gate wander off the beaten track and encounter things that were way over leveled for you. Like, typically you could wander into the Basilisk region in Baldur's Gate, and if you weren't prepared, you would very shortly be turned to stone. That was, telegraphed. There were stone statues around, but it was still easy to ignore that and find yourself killed by some very nasty enemies. Likewise, things like Firewine Bridge and that, you'd end up fighting things that you were not prepared for, having to reload and go away and come back later. So yeah, I really do think in this game that is in the spirit of Baldur's Gate, and some people don't like that because they consider that to be I guess a difficulty spike, but what's a CRPG without really difficult areas where you get destroyed and then you come back later and completely destroy those same encounters that were troubling you so much. Now, this particular playthrough concept, it doesn't mean everything will be recorded. There will be some things I do off camera, normally tedious stuff, but what I will try and do is record everything and discuss what I have done off camera if I've had to do things off camera, because nobody likes watching like endless toing and froing because of issues, or sort of sorting through inventories, moving stuff from party inventory into stash. That sort of stuff does not make a very good viewing, and although I can talk a lot, even I run out of things to say when I'm shifting stuff around. The last limitation to the playthrough and what I'm doing is I'm planning on playing a neutral good character. I think Kingmaker really actually rewards playing a neutral good character. There's benefits for all alignments, but I think it's particularly fitting alignment for this game. If you're going for the secret ending, it fits quite well, and that means that obviously I can't do evil resolution to things. There will be a couple of instances where I take a less than pleasant path in order to secure advisors and stuff, and things that I feel, neutral good as an alignment is not, a hard and fast, you must always pick that option. You're allowed a bit of leeway to pick other things if you feel they fit with what your character would do, even if they don't fit with what that overall alignment is. So yeah, that's the playthrough concept. It's really about showcasing, fights, strategies, methods, content, just sort of, how can I make a tribute to what is one of my favourite games ever released, and one of what I think is one of the best CRPGs ever released. So that's checking my clock. I've talked for a full 16 minutes on those first 2 bits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to discussing difficulty. And difficulty is really important when it comes to Pathfinder, because this is not an easy game. So I'm going to click New Game. These are DLCs here. We will be doing this one here, and we will be doing this one as well because it's integrated into the main game as well as being a sort of standalone roguelike. So yeah, it's a great picture. Yeah, if you like fantasy art, so it's fighting the Stag Lord actually. yeah, because you've got the owl bear there. Yeah. Anyway, here we are on the select a difficulty screen. Now I'm going to say straight up, so you're not waiting to find out what difficulty I'm going to be playing on. I'm going to be playing on challenging. Okay? And this is what I think is quite a nice balance between being too difficult and being too easy. That hasn't really explained it very well. So what I'll do is I'm just going to talk through what some of these things mean, and then talk through in relation to this difficulty. Now, the reason I like challenging, because it feels like your enemies are treated with the same degree of fairness as you are. Like, you don't have unfair advantage, although I shouldn't really call it unfair. You're on a level playing field with them as far as damage and critical hits and stuff count. So critical hits, you can reduce the severity of critical hits on your party. You can see on the left over here. You can have critical hits on weak, and actually on normal difficulty they are set to weak. Whereas on challenging, basically you get crits and they get crits, and they're both of the same weight. Now, especially early on, an unlucky crit or a burst of a couple of crits in a row is enough to send your character, into chunks. That might mean we require a couple of reloads in places. Hopefully not. I don't like reloading. I'd rather do it well or come back to it later than do lots of reloading, and I'll talk about that all the way through, because it's part of my philosophies to up itself as a word to relate to computer games, but part of my way of enjoying games like this is minimal reload, because it just feels a bit cheap to reload a lot. Not that I'm criticizing those who do reload. I think that's a perfectly valid way of playing, because these games can be frustrating. We've got a couple of settings here. So Death's Door, this means that if you the first time you die, you don't actually die. You merely get a condition called Death's Door, and that can be removed by resting in your sort of home base, your hub, and it just gives you a little bit of leeway. It's a very popular difficulty setting because it just, it means you can get away with more than what you'd be able to get away with if you didn't have it on. Like it means mistakes are not punished as heavily. Likewise, this is an even more forgiving option here. If you have dead companions rise after combat, you don't need to deal with death at all. If you die, they just pop back up again, right as rain. So it's like Death's Door is the intermediate thing. If you see on normal, Death's Door is on, like one free life, whereas Dead Companions Rise after combat only comes on if you're playing on story mode. Likewise, there are lots of negative effects in this game. Things like level drain, ability damage, ability drain, blindness is a particularly notorious one. Disease, poison, all this sort of stuff. You can have this disappear every time you rest. It's quite nice. Of course, we're not going to be playing with that on because I kind of feel like we should suffer the consequences of my bad play at the game. So, as you can see on challenging, that is off by default. You can, of course, switch it on, and then we're on a custom difficulty. Auto level up, we're going to have this off for everyone. The game tries its best. Somebody, a few years ago, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, laid out a level up path for all these companions, which should, in theory, synergize together. Now, I like to have maximum control over everything. Sort of control freak when it comes to playing the game, and I've got ideas for the companions, and so that's going to be off for everyone. It only comes on the lower difficulties. Enemy stat adjustments. It's interesting that you've either got somewhat easier on normal or somewhat tougher on challenging. And nowhere do you get the so-called normal enemies. This just means things get like small bonuses to armor class and stuff, and to hit. It's only really relevant at the beginning, which can be, well, I say that. It's relevant all the way through, but it's more punishing early on. We're going to keep this like this. We can overcome this stuff. And damage to party. Obviously, you can set this from 3 times damage. If anybody's familiar with the difficulty setting in Baldur's Gate, insane difficulty, so-called insane, meant enemies to double damage to you. We're just going to keep this at 1. If I do 10 damage to them, they should be doing 10 damage back to me. If you both roll the same, if you both have the same number. Enemy difficulty. These, which are on these higher difficulties here, you'll notice this warning which says requires a vast knowledge of the Pathfinder system. I don't claim vast knowledge, I just claim a bit of knowledge, and crucially, especially early on, this luck. I'll talk about these 2 difficulties slightly once I've gone through this list. Party speed depends on weight you're carrying, of course. You shouldn't be able to carry lots and lots of stuff without consequences. Retrain is off. If I really make a mistake, I'll fiddle around with this to rectify it, but I don't envisage myself making too many mistakes on leveling up, since I tend to plan these videos out in advance before I make them. Kingdom management. Now, you either love kingdom management or you really hate it. I'm actually going to be playing with kingdom management on normal, and that might seem, I guess, dangerous, because kingdom management is hard to manage, and you can get into what people refer to as like a death spiral, where everything goes horribly wrong for your kingdom. We're going to be finessing a well-managed kingdom, and this means we will get some negative stuff. We will fail events every so often, but we're going to try our hardest to manage our kingdom as well as possible without needing to drop it down to these easier difficulties. Might happen. I could make a load of catastrophic mistakes. These next 2, only active companions receive experience and only skill users receive skill check experience. These are generally, if you're playing solo, well, let me just say, the way experience works is that if you have a 6-person party, it will make no difference whether you've got these on. It'll say something different in the log, but it will not actually make a difference to how much experience you get. If you've got less than 6 members in your party and you have this on, you will level up faster. So obviously if you've only got 1 person, you're playing solo, you're going to level up 6 times as fast. And some people quite like these, and if they're playing like a character with lots of skills, they might quite like to feel that their main character is slightly higher level or just has a bit more experience than their companions. That can be quite a satisfying way to play, and I respect that. And likewise, you can use these to sort of finesse yourself, earlier levels. I don't think it's necessary in this game to do that, and I quite like having everyone at basically the same level. So I'm going to leave both of these off, even when we've got less than 6 people in our party. And we're not going to have the tutorial on. Immersive mode is quite interesting. I don't like it, simply because I like seeing everything that's going on. I like timers, I like health bars, I like enemy actions visible. I want to know exactly what they're doing and when, so I can have as much control as possible. So we're keeping immersive mode off. And Last Aslanti is the Iron Man mode. So Last Aslanti means you sort of get 1 save. It's a little bit more forgiving than some roguelike Iron Man modes, and if you feel like cheesing it, you can of course manually back up your save. You just need to go into the save folder and copy it somewhere else. But if you die, it will wipe your single save. And not that I'm condoning copying and pasting your backed up save back in so you can carry on, but generally you can quit out of an encounter. If it looks like things are going really badly, you can still quit and then reload your save, and it will be just before that encounter. No guarantee that you'll win the next time, but yeah, bit more forgiving than a sort of true hardcore experience. Still, it's a great way to play. I love playing on these modes just because it really makes you think. If you can never reload, if you fail a skill check, it's failed for good. If you die, you've got to start all the way back at the beginning in Jumandi Aldori's mansion, like that. The tension that comes from that, and some people absolutely love it. So the planning, the caution, the scouting, it's basically a completely different game. I'd highly recommend to anyone who likes this game and has never played on Last Aslanti to give it a go. Likewise, if you're familiar with Baldur's Gate, you should try playing Baldur's Gate Iron Man. Of course, that kind of works on the honor system because there's no built-in Iron Man mode in Baldur's Gate 2. But people that play Baldur's Gate Iron Man, they like it for what it is. So there's no need to, cheat yourself, because the reason you're playing is you just love the idea that once your character dies, you just got to start again at the beginning. And I played quite a lot of Baldur's Gate Iron Man over the years. If you die, even though you can reload a save, it doesn't have the appeal. Like, that character's dead. Rather re-roll. So that's you could tell I'm boasting a little bit about my credentials in Baldur's Gate, and I guess Icewind Dale Iron Man runs, which are just incredibly fun. So that's what we're going to have as our settings, just default challenging. Now I just want to talk about why we're not going hard, and then I'll talk a little bit about unfair as well. Now, the reason we're not going hard is, as I mentioned previously, I don't like reloading, and when you're playing on hard, there's a degree of luck with the dice rolls in the early game that makes it just quite tricky to get through it without without some reloads, like your likelihood that you're going to need to reload is increased on hard difficulty. Plus, it is genuinely quite punishing if you don't know what you're doing. Like, if you started this game blind on hard, it would just be like punishment. If you didn't know anything about Pathfinder when you decided to do that, it would be triple punishment. Would not recommend it. Would highly recommend starting on normal, and then once you've got the hang of the game, bump up to challenging, and then once you've got the hang of that, try on the harder difficulties. So the reason I'm not doing hard is because I don't think it makes very good viewing, because I try to minimize my reloads, and by trying to minimize my reloads, the easiest way I can do that is by not playing on a difficulty too hard for the vision I've got for this playthrough concept. And finally, unfair. Unfair is its own special game. So playing on unfair is, imagine you've got a game, like a computer game that's presented to you, and what you really want is a mode that requires you to take that game and just smash it apart. You're not treating it as a role-playing game anymore. You're treating it as this sort of fantastic puzzle that you're going to, crack open using anything possible. Nothing is too cheesy for unfair, because the computer is not playing fair with you. The stats of the enemies are boosted to such an extent that any idea of fair play is thrown completely out the window. And this is, fantastic mode of play. I've played a lot more Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous on unfair than I have Kingmaker on unfair, and I just love this. The concept behind this, the reason this exists. I think Steam achievements say 0.5% of players, 0.5% of owners of Kingmaker have completed the game on unfair and got that achievement, which is still quite a lot. Like, that's 1 in 200. That's still pretty good. From an achievement point of view, that's a hard thing to do. There's also achievements for completing it on Last Aslanti mode, which likewise don't have particularly many people. I think it might be 0.7 or something. I just pulled that out my ass. But so we're going to be playing, as I said, on challenging for the sake of my sanity. The other thing is, as the difficulties increase, the viability of the companions you get shrinks. So, and you find yourself wishing you had mercenaries built in particular ways to really synergize together to make encounters really a lot easier. Say, for example, if you had just pull something out the hat, if you had 2 sorcerers with Stinking Cloud, right? The mid-game encounters, you could make everyone trivial by just stacking Stinking Clouds and fighting within that Stinking Cloud, making many of the enemies unable. Because if you've got 7 or 8 Stinking Clouds stacked on top of each other, that's 7 or 8 saves they need to make in order to do anything. So you can turn it, you can break any part of the game, and that's just one way to do it. But as I said, challenging difficulty. So next I was just going to talk briefly about this Enhanced Edition Plus versus the original, and I don't think I need to labour the fact that when this game released, when Kingmaker released, it had a lot of bugs in it. I didn't buy it on release, but by people that played the game at release, the game was basically uncompletable for a short period of time after it was released, and people were encountering game-breaking bugs. And one of the things you find with this game, and I found with Wrath of the Righteous is that the game is so complex. This CRPG, what's so good about it is that it's really complex. But that complexity means a lot of the time there's so many mechanics to hold in your head that often you don't know whether something is a feature or a bug. And so, it looks like you're not getting such and such a bonus or something, and you go and ask on a forum saying, I think I found a bug, I'm not getting this. And then some know-it-all like me goes, no, actually that's a feature. You just haven't understood this particular thing. It's contained in this tooltip. But the complexity means, like, as a new player, you'd have had no way of knowing what was a feature and what was a bug. And that can be really disheartening as a player, because is it you doing something wrong, or is the game broken, basically? With the Enhanced Edition Plus, we're now in a situation where the game is basically complete. Like, a lot of those bugs have been squashed. I encounter almost no bugs in my playthrough. Some of the classes still have wonky stuff to do with them, and you'll notice that if you play Wrath of the Righteous, like, the game was released with some of the archetypes in a rather unfinished state, which, I give the game a pass because it's just more goodness that I really like. But I guess if I was a neutral observer, I'd say, that's an issue, and people don't like those bugs. But like I said, like, it's almost like half the bugs people think they encounter, it's very often it's due to them not understanding the very complex mechanics, which is understandable because the game has a reputation for bugs. Your go-to thing when something seems to be going wrong is to say that it's a bug, or is to assume it's a feature when it actually is a bug, and get really frustrated that it seems to have some sort of bullshit feature built into it, when actually that's a complete mistake and should be patched ASAP. So yeah, the Enhanced Plus edition, most of the bugs have been, all the serious bugs and lots of mechanical issues have been patched. Also, the second part is the difficulty has actually been toned down in successive patches, and I've actually seen this in Wrath of the Righteous as well. When Wrath of the Righteous released, Vescator swarms were doing, they were hitting you multiple times around, and they've been toned down repeatedly over the series of 3 or so patches. But it was like when they moved through you, they hit sort of 6 times around, and it was like, what is going on here? Q sort of kiting them around and throwing fire at them. But difficulty, there's an infamous encounter very early on, first encounter after the prologue, where you'd encounter 3 wolves, and turned out people were getting full party wipe by their first encounter in the game, and that was toned down to thylacines, because wolves have got an ability called trip, and if they trip you, you fall on the floor, and when you stand up, you incur an attack of opportunity, and when you're down, you get penalties to armor class. Basically, if you get tripped, it's a bit of a nightmare, so you want to try and avoid that happening. But, for the first genuine encounter in Chapter 1, it was pretty punishing, so they swapped that round. And secondly, there are some other encounters that were made easier, like the, again, infamous Fangberry Cave, where spider swarms were moved around. I'm not gonna. Oh, also there's additional content, some cut or content that didn't make the initial release was included or restored, however you want to say it. Basically, it's in the game when it wasn't in the first in the game as it was released immediately. Now, I've got 2 other things I want to talk about in this, Part 0, Part 1, and the next part is to talk about mods, because of course mods can change the game enormously. Mods can actually make the game easier without really realizing that they are. Mods can make the game harder. Mods can really change the way the game is played. There's things like tabletop tweaks and stuff that really change the game. Now, my approach to mods is that I've only got one installed at the moment, and that is the Bag of Tricks, the Toy Box mod, Bag of Tricks mod, which gives you lots and lots of tools to fiddle with the game behind the scenes, and lots and lots of cheats, should you so wish. And the reason I've got that installed is if something goes really wrong, or I miss something, or I mess up, or I encounter a bug, it enables me to tweak it behind the scenes to fix it, rather than having to go back to a save before such a thing happened. And that's really for my ease of doing this showcase, doing this demonstration, because I don't want to have to repeat content unless absolutely necessary. So obviously I make hard saves as backups, but that mod allows me to do tweaks behind the scenes. Now I've got no components of it are active, so it's got lots and lots of components where you can sort of influence your roles, influence all sorts of stuff. So I don't actually have any components of it active. So, but I just thought I'd say that I do have that mod installed. I don't have Call of the Wild, which is one of the main mods. It has lots and lots of new classes. It's really quite cool. I might be wrong here, but as far as I know, I mean, it was the work of one person or a very small team of people, but it seems to be like somebody single-handedly made an enormously thorough modification to this game, and it's a really popular mod. I think it's in the top mods on for Pathfinder Kingmaker on Nexus, along with some portrait mods, and of course the Bag of Tricks mod. Now, finally, for this part of the video, the pre-character creation stuff, I want to talk about, and this ties into difficulty, I want to talk about real-time with pause versus turn-based. Now, I'm going to be playing almost exclusively with real-time with pause, okay? It's my favourite way to play. Now, I guess this is a touchy subject, and I guess a controversial subject, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, people that like one mode over another can get quite heated about why that particular mode is superior. And the real answer is, I guess, that real-time with pause is no, they're both equally valid ways of playing. So what I'll do is I'll just outline my reasons for playing real-time with pause rather than turn-based. And the number one reason is speed. So that's number one. Encounters can be done, over in 10 seconds in real-time with pause. Something that might take, minutes in turn-based. Turn-based is slow, and while I can understand that it's good playing, I do not feel that it makes good watching. I'd rather set all my actions and advance time in slow motion, which you can do by pressing the V key on your keyboard. It's probably the best little thing that's not particularly known about this game. You can advance frame by frame if you want. It's just perfection. So it makes better viewing, in my opinion. I mean, the way I'd say is that turn-based, to me, and this is to me, feels artificial. Now, I know that Pathfinder and the Dungeons and Dragons as it was based on, as it's a fork from, are turn-based, but I always kind of ascribed to the idea that turn-based was actually itself came about because of the difficulty of modelling real-time encounters for a group of role players sat around a table. Like, you can't do real-time when you're doing tabletop stuff, as far as I understand. It just doesn't really work, so it's much easier for everyone to take turns. Now, when Baldur's Gate was being built, there was quite a lot of pressure on them because of the rise of real-time strategy games to do something that was more real-time. And what they came up with was this really interesting hybrid called real-time with pause, where things run in real-time simultaneously, which I love, but you have the option to pause at any time. And I like to pause a lot because, one of the arguments in favour of turn-based is that it allows you more fine control, but you can get that same fine control in real-time with pause if you're doing lots of pausing. And maybe, the combat at that point actually slows down to the same speed as it would be in turn-based. But just, it feels in real-time with pause, it feels like you're sort of intricately choreographing a sort of fight, like you're, some director, moving your actors around the screen and watching them play out, in this intensely choreographed action scene. Whereas for me, and this is for me only, the turn-based feels a bit like you're playing chess against the computer. So that's the first argument. The second argument is there's actually things you can do in real time with pause which you can't do in turn-based. And the number one thing is interrupting spellcasters. This was a feature of Baldur's Gate 2. You could interrupt a spellcaster if you hit them when they were casting a spell. Absolutely great. You can do that in real time with pause. You can't do that in turn-based because every turn happens sequentially. Other things which real time with pause allow, is just particular strategies. Now, the most obvious one, of course, would be kiting around, and I don't intend to do any kiting, but it is there. So real time with pause opens up new tactics which are sort of closed down in turn-based. Now, of course, turn-based means you will never miss an action. You get better action. Like, I use the term action economy to mean, in this sense, you get you can utilize every single action, move action, swift action, free action, etc. So you're not going to miss out on them. But Owlcat sort of designed this game as a real time with pause game, and that's another main reason for doing it. The game was designed to be real time with pause, and turn-based kind of feels like a bit of a hacky way to play it. And the way it's designed around real time with pause kind of means that missing the odd action and stuff here and there isn't going to break the bank, Maybe in a few fights, but then I'll be, playing very, very slowly in real time with pause. So, you can miss out on stuff, but it's not such a big issue for me. Now, I realise that all of that might be really controversial if you're 100% wedded to turn-based in these games, and I can understand that because I'm not part of the group that plays CRPGs as computer versions of a tabletop, right? I don't play tabletop RPGs in a group. I don't see these as a substitute for that. I kind of see them as their whole little niche genre with which I love in a way that, in my mind, is relatively far removed from the tabletop game, even if it does have the same rule set. And I'm very thankful that there exist a very small handful of real-time with pause games with the degree of complexity that Pathfinder Kingmaker has got. So yeah, that's my little cheerleading for real-time with pause, and I'm very glad that Wrath of the Righteous, even though it has turn-based built in, I've played on both modes, and I really do feel like Wrath of the Righteous plays out better in real-time with pause than it does in turn-based. You know, even at harder difficulties, you can play hard and unfair on real-time with pause, no problem, as long as you know what you're doing, and as long as you're willing to pause a lot. Yeah, so I think that's a common myth that is frequently propagated, the idea that you can't play on harder difficulties on real-time with pause. I've run through Act 1 and 2 of Wrath of the Righteous on unfair, using real-time with pause, and mostly using the stock companions the game gives you. So I think there was one fight I did turn-based on, and that was because of some really fiddly stuff, but it was almost entirely real-time with pause. So yeah, anyway, that's not meant to be boasting. That's just it's possible, and it's quite good fun. Now I'm going to pause the video here, this being my introduction. Now the next part is going to be talking about character creation and going through it in overly excruciating detail. So yeah, tune in for the next video.